I like the way everybody here is scattered around a little bit. Nobody wants to be on camera. Look, there's a nice space next to me. Sit right here on camera. Holly, come on. I like it. They just look, honestly, look. I mean, Graham's here. Look, he's got a front row seat. That's fine. Yes. The chickens in case they get picked on, isn't it? Right. So who wants to start then? Because I don't like doing all the talking. It's always nice if somebody else talks. Principles of flight. What are principles of flight? By the way, if you don't know, it really doesn't matter. Just have a guess. Just it's no. As always, the the only silly question is
Not asking the question?
the one you don't ask. Yeah. So always remember that. There's nothing. Just a quick bit of background for us instructors. It's really important because if we ask you, "Did you understand that?" and you nod, that's terrible because we don't know if you actually understood what we just said. So we have to ask you questions about it. So yeah, don't be afraid to ask a question. Okay. Anyway, so principles of flight. What's principles of flight all about?
Lift and weight, thrust and drag.
Yeah, pretty good. Yeah. Certainly some key words in there. It's very good. Yeah, absolutely.
Black magic.
Black magic, yeah. And a bit of fairy dust, isn't it? And a bit of like, please, Lund, yeah, what's principles of flight about?
Well, first of life, you must understand the physics is law with Newton laws and the weight comparing the all weight is everything together to aerodynamic is
Yeah, very good. Megan, you're not absolved from this. Hiding in the background there. Principles of flight, what do you think that might be about?
I know it's to do with the physics.
Yeah, okay.
Right.
That seems to be cropping up a fair bit at the moment. Physics. How about anybody online? Principles of flight?
I was going to say the physics of how an aircraft or helicopter flies and how the air moves, but physics, I guess, is the heart of it.
Yeah, good. Anybody else want to add anything to that? Anybody,
It's already been mentioned, but it's like the generation of lift.
Yeah, that's definitely part of it, isn't it? So these are all good answers. And by the way, I'm not about to say, but you're all wrong, because no, they're all good answers. I just want to get a bit of a feel to make sure everybody knows what we're talking about. So when we do these sorts of ground school sessions for anybody that's new, remember this is going to be a bit of a broad all-rounder to try and accommodate for everybody. Some things you'll get straight away, some things right. It doesn't matter. It's really not a problem. It's to try and encourage you, if nothing else, and to maybe some clear up some little areas. And when we're learning something like principles of flight, we're learning it to well, why are we learning it?
Why we learn it?
Yeah.
We learn it to how the plane is flying, like
Plane? You're in the wrong school, so you need to go down the road there. Helicopter, I think you said, didn't you? I'm sure you said helicopter plane. Yeah. Yes, sorry.
blade is working, how we what are we going to about mass, parasite drag, all of everything.
But again, please just say the obvious stuff. But why learn this stuff?
How the controls work and what they do.
Yeah, but as long as you push and you pull and it moves, who cares? Does it really matter? How many?
That wasn't the way I did it on the trial flight.
No, of course, that's right.
I nearly rolled it, I think.
Because very, very important thing is flight.
It is, yes, absolutely.
Everything inside. Like,
and you hear Blund, all right, what you're saying? Yeah, good, okay. We'll say if you sort of know, you might have to just speak up a little bit.
It tells you about equilibrium or hovers.
It does, and if we kind of just package that all up.
How to fly on mountain.
I don't want to beat this to death. I'm just trying to make sure so principles of flight are exactly that, aren't they? The principles behind how it flies. And all your answers were great. All the things you added in there, whether it be physics, in lift, and etc. And we're learning it because, well, We need to, because that's how we get these things off the ground and make them fly. We don't just push a button and hope for the best. In reality, we actually have to do this, don't we? So it'd be really important to learn exactly how these principles make this fly. But also, of course, and it does go hand in hand, but we're learning to pass an exam. But so we don't want to learn it just purely to pass an exam, and then I'm going to do that whole. So therefore, we don't want just bashing question banks just to learn answers to questions. No, 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 no. And Holly's sitting there, and she's literally thinking the same thing as me. You could get 100% in an exam, great. But if you don't actually understand what these principles are and how they work, that's not good for us. We'd much rather the other way around. That you've got good understanding, but you should maybe struggle with the exam. Maybe only get 75%, you still pass, but you've got good understanding. So it's really important that we really do understand because it's what's keeping us up in the air, isn't it? Making these things work. Okay, so this is why usually in principles of flight, it starts right at the base level. It just starts off with some very, very basic, maybe terminology first of all, so we don't all assume we know what we're talking about, and then we slowly get into the physics of it, and it gets slightly more complicated. And we add it all together and create all these wonderful effects, primary and secondary effects, and all sorts of things. So just to make sure it's lovely and clear in our minds, is principles of flight the same as aircraft general knowledge? Do you think?
Is it near together?
They do sit together, don't they?
Yeah.
Without a doubt. Because principles of flight might talk about rotor blades. And if you had no idea what a rotor blade is, well, it's quite tricky to learn about the principles of it. So it does help to study these two topics together, aircraft general knowledge and principles of flight. So we're just going to delve into the principles of flight part. So I'll try not to go off down the AGK part of it. Okay. So when learning about principles of flight, it said because it makes the helicopter fly, and therefore it'd be a good idea to know exactly how that all works. Why else might it be a good idea to know principles of flight apart from the exam?
In case it goes wrong, so that you know when something goes wrong, like how each control is going to interact with each other, so that you can deal with it.
But
You can anticipate what's going to happen.
good, that's it. That's what I was after next. So I was about to say, in our perfect world, nothing ever goes wrong, does it? But of course it does. Yeah. So now we need to know if what you're doing with the aircraft is going wrong. A, you need to be able to spot that and understand that, hang on, this is not what I planned for it to do. And B, how can you now turn it back around and get it back, if you like, under control again? So it's very important that it's not just simply to make it go faster, slower, up and down, etc., but actually how things could go wrong. If we just skip slightly ahead for a minute, Stella, because you said about that, which is what I was after. Um, just give me a bit of an idea of principles of flight. It can be an air exercise if you like, that we might consider things aren't going amazingly well.
Auto rotation as an
Uh,
exercise.
yeah, absolutely. So hopefully everybody here will just go, yes, I knew that. Helicopters glide. Is where everybody goes, oh, yes, I knew that. I knew that. Yeah, yeah. Helicopters glide. How many people knew helicopters can glide backwards? We've got one. Anybody else?
Yeah.
Two. Yep, yep. Helicopters can glide sideways. They can glide. They can't glide upside down very well, I'll be honest. But yeah, so a helicopter gliding is it's auto rotation. That's what we call it, isn't it? And when we look at the principles behind the rotor disc, I always sort of teach everybody, well, first of all, it's a circle. There's no beginning and end. There's no front or back. So as far as the rotor disc is concerned, it doesn't particularly mind which way it goes. It's a helicopter. It can underpower, it can hover, it can go straight up, straight down, forward, backwards, left or right. But what is forward and backwards? It's only because we're sitting in there looking out of a windscreen and we decide that's forward, but the rotor disc doesn't know that. So yeah, helicopters can glide backwards. Very good. Now, somebody else give me another example of maybe in flight wise, principles of flight, etc., where things aren't going amazingly well.
Vortex ring.
Excellent. Yeah, good. So if we didn't understand vortex ring, it might not end amazingly well. So we really want to understand it, don't we? How it happens, what would cause it, not because we want to go and make it happen, but we want to recognize it so we can recover from that situation. And there we are. There's another principles of flight. Any others?
Mass pumping.
Yes, absolutely. Although that does definitely start to hit down the aircraft general knowledge because it depends on the type of rotor head. But yeah, we'll put that in with principles of
Never
flight.
exceeding speed for
Good.
not good.
Yep. Again, aircraft limitations. So they're limited on velocity never exceeds, etc. So V&Es for good reason. And it's usually something along those lines. Or what else for V&A? Velocity never
Effective
exceeds.
translational lift.
That's a good thing though, isn't it?
It is a
Normally.
good thing, but you need to know how to control it, and also when the nose comes up,
Yeah,
these kind of things.
they roll, etc. Or what
Yeah,
about the loss of effective translational lift?
yeah, that's when you feel it.
You know, it's not very often that losing this thing called effective translation lift, which we might get onto hopefully, is sort of it's an apparent suddenly the rotors work so much better and generate more lift. Well, we get the reverse when we slow down. We lose this apparent extra lift and the helicopter sinks. And usually that's not a great thing. We don't particularly want that to happen, so we have to prevent it.
Rotating blade stall.
Yeah, the retreating blades are excellent, good. And there's a whole load, you know, if you read the books, there's a whole load of them. Okay, so principles of flight. Where do we start with all of this, do you think?
Underground lift.
Yeah. So what is lift?
I think the basic would be how the aerofoil is
Okay.
shaped and how to create, the best lift, less drag.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, how to make it the most effective.
Yeah. Okay. Anything else?
It's created by a pressure difference.
Yes. Yeah. So if we were, because I just want to, I'm trying to, we're trying to drag it out of everybody because it's one of the best ways to learn, and unfortunately, it does feel like it drags out sometimes. But trying to get the basics first. Remember, for us instructors, if we don't lay good foundations with your knowledge, it's very difficult to build on top of it, and eventually it just crumbles because you just haven't got anything to support the rest of your knowledge. So we're always trying to make sure that first of all that real rock bottom layer is nice and solid.
Can I ask what is vortex ring?
Oh, vortex ring very, very briefly is where the air kind of recirculates back through the rotor blades, and it's not great because they lose a fair amount of their lift and descend and all sorts of things. So yeah, thank you for asking. Yeah, absolutely. So but there's a lot of principles of flight and these sorts of things to cover. So we'll see how many we get through and cover. But I want to just get this grounding in there first of all. Um, so principles of flight, you know, it isn't just about the main rotor blades, is it?
Mm,
We've got tail rotor blades. They're going to be in there, aren't they?
yes.
We've got horizontal stabilizers. We've got vertical stabilizers. They're all part and parcel of it, aren't they, as well?
Yes.
Then what about if we start going down the route of NOTAR helicopters and these sorts of things as well? Fenestroms versus tail rotors, conventional tail rotors, etc., etc. There's a lot of that side of it as well. Well, I guess we probably better start off a little bit with, if we're talking about flight, do helicopters fly underwater? No, they fly in the air, don't they? So, anybody want to tell me anything interesting about the air? Apart from it's generally good because without it we're scuppered because we wouldn't be able to fly for a start off or breathe.
Horizon. It's very good from it.
Horizon, yes. So when we're looking out, the horizon is going to be very useful. But how about just the air, the atmosphere?
Density.
Density, good.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Density changes with altitude,
It does. And it increases or decreases?
decreases as altitude increases.
Good. And why is that significant?
Because above a certain altitude, density is not enough to maintain the helicopter in the air.
Yeah, I mean, if you just go to an extreme and manage to get your helicopter out in space, don't ask me how you manage that, but anyway, there is no air. So of course it won't work, will it? So the density of the air. So therefore the denser the air, the better?
Not necessarily, because density also contributes to drag.
It does, yes, very good. So the denser the air, the more drag. And drag is exactly that, a bit of a drag, isn't it? There's very few times when drag is a good thing. There's a couple of times actually where it's very useful, but for the most part, drag is a pain because it takes a lot of energy to overcome it, which is not so good. And when we talk about that, maybe drag on the fuselage is trying to slow it down. But what about the rotor blades? Do they prefer denser air, I wonder?
I would say yes.
Yes, most definitely.
Yes.
Yeah, without a shadow of a doubt.
Okay.
So if the air is less dense, they have to work a lot harder to lift the same weight because give or take the tiny amounts, the helicopter weighs the same, doesn't it? Whether you're a foot off the ground or 5,000 feet off the ground. But the poor rotor blades, they've got to lift that, and they're just using the air, and they can't get a very good grasp on it if it's thin. So yeah, the air is really important to understand about density, etc. And then not only, although it starts to go slightly down aircraft general knowledge, but not only the rotor blades like dense air, but what else likes dense air? I wonder.
Well, us.
We do, yeah, absolutely, because we breathe better, generally speaking, don't we? So that helps, most definitely. The
The
principles
engine.
like good, the engine, absolutely. So the engine likes dense air as well. So for the most part, the denser the air, the better it works. It's just there's a bit more drag on the fuselage, but the benefits of the rotors and engine tend to far outweigh that. And then we're restricted by airspeeds anyway. Um, Okie dokie. So therefore, anything that affects the density of the air, yep,
Temperature.
yep,
Right.
yep, that's right. And some of these things are kind of linked, but yeah, so temperature, somebody said pressure will affect the density of the air. The height, of course, yeah, we've already said about that one as well.
Humidity.
Humidity, yes, absolutely. Fun enough, I was talking to, what's I flying with today? Lee, that's right. He said, ever noticed if you fly in through a slightly wispy bit of, I'm not going to say cloud, but air, even if it's very stable, the helicopter changes its you can feel it in the aircraft. The density of the changes because it's lighter. Water vapor is lighter. Okay,
Moisture content effect.
absolutely. Yeah. So all of these things will affect the performance and the principles of flight behind it. Well, do they affect the principles of flight? They kind of do. It doesn't suddenly radically change anything desperately, but most definitely has an effect, doesn't it?
Dry air is very bad for density. Dry air.
Dry?
Dry air.
Are you sure?
Yes.
No,
dry air
oh,
is
what's that? No,
more
you're
dense.
no, actually, no, you're definitely not sure. That's the wrong way. Yeah, no, dry air is actually much better. Yeah, dry air is better than humid air. So make sure it's dry air. Yeah. So we all, well, generally, you soon learn that the colder, the crisper, the drier. Yeah, for the most part, everything likes it because usually visibility is better for a start off, but the engine and the rotors love it. Yeah, cold, crisp, dense, clean air. Excellent. And for the most part, we like it, apart from it's a bit chilly when you check in your helicopter. But it's good, isn't it? Okay, good. So you can hear we're sort of making a big thing about this because it is significant, that density of that air. And we're always trying to think of this before we go flying about what's the density like. So today it's very low pressure. I'm looking at Holly at the moment. And we notice that in the performance of the aircraft. And they don't perform quite as well. All right, so we've got air, first of all, is a good base to start with. What else have we got if we're talking about principles of flight? Yeah. Megan, obviously we'll turn it off when we're finished. Yeah, no problem. It's all right. Yes, yeah, we'll just kind of put that within just air for a minute. If we're talking about wind and those sorts of things, absolutely. So we'll be thinking about updraft, downdraft, turbulence, all those sorts of things. We'll just leave that for 1 second. So principles of flight before we start really delving any much further.
Control and effectors on principle of flights.
Yes. Just elaborate a little bit more on that, Fondland.
Pardon?
Just what do you mean by that? Control and effect, I think you said, didn't you?
Yes, like a collective control, cycling control, swashblade controlling, Curiously effectors.
Yeah, okay, so yeah, we'll eventually get down the route of what the controls do, won't we?
Yeah.
So what I was after is some of the things you actually said earlier, We used some quite nice words that you all came out with. We said, for instance, drag. We've been talking about that already. And for the most part, I said that's not great because it tends to take a lot more energy to overcome. But might be a one time when it's good. What else have we got when we start thinking about those sorts of parts of it? Did somebody say to me lift?
Different drag. Hover.
So we've got lift.
Aerofoils.
Yeah, the shape of the aerofoil. Good. We're going to come to that one soon, very soon. Lift. What is lift, by the way? Can anybody tell me? Yes, you, madam, over there in the chair with the white shirt on that looks like an instructor. Yes, we'll be looking at that. So lift is just one part of it, isn't it? Yeah.
Speed,
Yes. And what do you mean by speed, Stella?
airspeed, like
Yeah.
going over the aerofoil.
Good. Yes, that's right. So if you like, the airspeed of the rotor blade. What do we call that though? Because we don't tend to call that airspeed over a rotor blade. We call that
Indicated
Isn't
airspeed.
well, don't forget, indicated airspeed is just simply the speed of the aircraft, isn't it?
Yeah.
That's fine. That's a bit further down than I'm after. What I'm trying to build in is actually a vector diagram and the lift formula.
Dynamic pressure.
Shape of aerofoil.
Yeah, shape of aerofoil, good. And Clive said about that. Density of the air. Velocity.
Surface.
Yes, velocity.
And dynamic pressure.
And when we talk about the speed of the rotor blade, we measure it in a couple of ways. Revolutions per minute, so RPM. Sometimes it's abbreviated NR, by the way. If you ever see NR, just figure that's the speed of the rotor blades. And also so we've got the revolution. So if you take the Cabrix as an easy number to remember because it's always on the screen. 530. Yes, maybe. It's 530 revolutions
The
per
angle of
minute.
attack or the diameter of the rotor?
Yes, so we've mentioned so good angle of attack just cropped up then.
Is it angle?
The diameter.
Yeah.
So if I said a Cadbury rotor blade is going around at 530 revolutions per minute, how fast is that blade going?
Sorry, Captain.
If I said that a rotor blade of the Cadbury G2 turning clockwise in view from above is doing 530 normally 530 revolutions per minute. It's a trick question, by the way. How fast is the rotor blade going?
It depends
Depends on the radius.
mass you're looking at because
Absolutely.
perpendicular distance from the axis of rotation matters.
Indeed, yes. So when we start looking at
Revs times radius, basically.
yes, when
Yeah.
we start looking down the blade, we're not talking now speed in revolutions because we've just kind of said about that. We're talking actual wind velocity over the blade. So what the blade is feeling, airflow. And you could say, like you sort of said, Stella, it's almost like the airspeed. Sorry. As I said, I can't talk too much. It's the airspeed over the aerofoil is going to impact how much lift it generates. So for instance, the rotor tip, without trying to do the math, just roughly, I wonder how fast a Cadbury rotor blade is going around at the tip with the airflow. Anybody want to have a stab at that? It's doing 530 revolutions a minute and it's got about a 7-meter diameter disc. But it's like, quick, stick it into like ChatGPT or something. Well, give or take, it's just roughly about 400 nautical miles an hour. So somewhere borderline about 500 mile an hour, a bit less than that, but just roughly. What about the root of the blade right down the other end near the rotor hub?
Almost zero.
Not a lot at all, yeah. It's much slower. So the lift generated along that blade, if it didn't have this thing called twist in it, would be very uneven. Right, so, God, do you know, I haven't done a whiteboard.
Limited by the speed of sound.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, mustn't go trans or supersonic. That's really bad news. And this is where flying too fast has a problem because the blade that's what we perceive as sweeping forwards is an advancing blade. But that's a bit further down the line. We'll get there. That's a good. Where's whiteboard gone? I think it's in here, isn't it? God, I haven't done this for ages. Sorry, just bear with me, please. A video file, second camera. That's sharing. Can anybody remember where a whiteboard is in? There it is. What if it's
I can
still
see it in the more.
loading your whiteboard? Okay. Does no, there's none there, is there? Just a new one. I haven't used right. Navigate your whiteboard. Press H right click to move quickly around the whiteboard space. Okay, is that sharing with you a white screen or something?
It is, yeah.
Brilliant. Okay. God almighty, I haven't used it for a while, so do forgive me if I'm not very good at it. Oh wait, stop drawing on my board.
I'm sorry.
That's all right. I've never done that before. I've never actually shared it like that. That's it must be. I didn't mean to actually share it. Doesn't matter. That's okay. 9 people are following you. Does that mean stop would stop it? Don't know. Right. So the lift formula. Let's see if I can write on here with my finger. So, oh gosh, that is not a good start.
I think you have a text there, Paul. You can use text.
Ah, do you know what? I want to embarrass myself with my handwriting. I'll give it a go. If it's really bad, then I'll stop. So L for lift equals. So if we were going to attempt to calculate lift, and we're not actually really going to put numbers on this because it all gets too complicated. What does lift equal? Well, all the things you've been talking about. So yes, so we need to know about the CL. That's the coefficient of lift. Shape of aerofoil. What else does CL incorporate? Does anybody know?
Pressure. Oh,
That's going to come in a minute.
Pitch.
Angle of attack.
Sorry, second.
Line.
Angle of attack.
Yeah, good. So the angle of attack is in there. An angle of attack will accommodate things like pitch and various other things as well. Good. All right. So that's the coefficient of the lift for the most part. Then there's this bit here, a bit of magic. Just makes it work. Okay, just does. Then we've got, what's this? Oops. That's supposed to be an H, by the way. And that's supposed to be an R.
Density.
Rho.
Density.
Yes, it is. Yeah. And that's the very thing we were talking about. It has a significant impact on the lift, the density of the air. We've already just said, go up, it's thinner air. It'll have a negative effect on it, won't it? And then we've got this one down here, velocity squared. But we're going to just break that down in a minute. And then we've got, yes, or span. Yeah, absolutely. So from all of this, we can finally calculate lift. Now,
And what is span?
oh, the area you're looking at. So if you were considering the whole rotor disc, for instance, you could think of it like that. Yeah, but quite often we,
Correct area.
yeah, but quite often we'll break it down. Maybe we'll only look at a very small section because it differs down the blade because of things like the rotational velocity.
Changes with the blade. The blade is
If
not.
the blade's got, yeah, that's right. If the blade's got twist in it, it will alter how. And blade twist is there to try and even out some of the lift. And this is, we can even touch upon that now. If we think about a rotor blade, or we won't make too much reference to wings, but they are basically wings, aren't they? At the end of the day, they just rotate round. A rotor blade, along its length, some of our helicopters have got really long blades, and they're not completely rigid because they would snap. That'd be a really bad idea. So they can flex and all sorts of things. But if along the blade, the lift you generate would be very uneven. So imagine that the root of the blade, it doesn't generate much lift, but it generates far more lift towards the tip. What will happen to that blade as it spins round and starts to generate this lift? It's going to bend up.
Yeah.
And if you were then to feather the blade, it would kind of do this sort of movement almost in an extreme, which would be dreadful, terrible. And so it really we can't have it bending that much. It's got to be able to flex a bit. And there's a really, there's a really good YouTube video I show you of a rotor blade in flight. It's of an old helicopter. My God, it's an awful. It does this. It literally does this as it goes round. It's terrifying. But anyway, so this whole lift, or this uneven lift along the blade, is not ideal. To prevent this buckling, bending, you'd have to make the blade really stiff and rigid, which is a bad idea because it would fracture, wouldn't it? Not good at all. So how are they going to resolve this problem?
Is it counteracted by the centrifugal force of the fact that it's
Well,
going down?
yeah, the centrifugal force does help to kind of keep things fairly flat, but not entirely. Not entirely. So if let's have a quick look at the lift formula. So imagine just first of all, along the length of the blade, we want to try and, if possible, make sure it has an even amount of lift along the length of the blade. In the equation right now, the half you can't change, it just is. The density of the air, let's just for a second say that's a constant for a moment, okay? So it doesn't get too complicated. So that hasn't changed. We're not changing the area, the surface area, or the span of the rotor disc we're talking about, or the blade. So something's got to alter somewhere along the lines. And the problem is when we break down this V squared, it's kind of breaks down into VR, which is your RPM, and VW, which is the airflow across the blade. Well, along the blade length, the RPM is no different. It's 530 at the tip, it's 530 at the root. That's just no different. But what is significantly different is the VW, as we already said. The tip going through the air very, very fast. So if this is a big number, it stands to reason, down here, you're probably going to have a bigger number, aren't you? And if at the root of the blade, the VW is much smaller, then the lift is going to be smaller. And we've just said that's not good. So who's heard a blade twist? Yeah, you see, some people have, not everybody has. So if you deliberately put some twist in the blade, and what happens usually is the cabrits will go clockwise. The root of the blade will have an amount of pitch, whereas towards the tip, it tends to flatten out, possibly to nothing at all. So that on the ground, for instance, with the collective lever down, so we haven't added any of our own collective pitch, the root has already got some pitch, which very indirectly will increase this coefficient and start to increase this lift. But that's just down the root of the blade. Now, the root of the blade, the VW is very, very slow, relatively speaking. So even though it's got this whole load of a pitch on it, the amount of lift it's generating is not a lot. It's not suddenly going to try and make us fly away. And in fact, as instructors, when we have to get in and out doing solos and things, you really can't feel a lot coming down through the rotor disc, even though it's whizzing round above your head. There's not a lot of airflow being blown downwards at that point in time. Anyway, so because of this blade twist, when we are flying, because the tip has got less pitch angle than the root, it's all in here. So the coefficient of lift of that blade is messed around with deliberately by the manufacturer to almost reduce it at the tip for a given collective position, but increase it at the root to attempt to even out the lift along the blade. So we don't get this dreadful distortion. I'm going to ask one of the worst questions as an instructor. Does everybody understand that? And we're not supposed to say that because we should then individually ask somebody. So just reiterate what I was, along those lines, facilitate. But that's the general gist behind it. There's a bit more to it, but I don't want to spend too long on just that one item. But if you're okay with that,
Cool.
Would you all be happy designing your own rotor blade?
yeah, that's right. So go and draw me a rotor blade. Yeah. Okay.
Cool.
So now, yes, Sophie.
The VR is for root. The R, what does it?
It's for RPM. Okay. So it's just simply the rotor RPM.
And what about the W?
The W is the velocity of the airflow going over it. So the
velocity of the airflow going over it.
So it's not exactly right, but you could think of it as wind velocity because the B and the W or the WV just happens to be. It's not bad. It'll work, but it's the measurement of the airflow over the blade.
Okay, cool. Thank
you. Then we realize that these two constantly change and they're hiding in there. When we start talking about when we alter the RPM or we alter the velocity of the airflow over the blade, because we've got to start talking about, well, what about when a helicopter moves? For the moment, we've just looked at a blade, just one single blade, just to get the idea about starting to look at the lift formula. Okay, now let's actually look at the rotor disc as a whole. So if you're in still air, so zero wind, etc., you're not moving. If we were to measure this all the way 360 degree, wrong helicopter, 360 degree round, you would say the rotational RPM of the tip is 530, and the velocity of the wind going over the tip is, oh, just say 400. It's an easy number to pick up, or 400 nautical miles an hour. Fabulous. Surely that's it, job done. If you pull up on the collective lever, you generally speaking increase this bit down here and it goes up. You put the lever down, it goes down. Happy days. But what about when that rotor disc is moving through the air, or there's an airflow blowing over the disc? Are they the same? Are they different? So forget the rest of the helicopter for one moment. You've just got a round rotor disc spinning round, attached to nothing. If it moves through the air, is that the same as or different from the airflow being blown over it?
It's changing.
It's
One side is going faster and the other side is going slower in terms
It
of
is,
wind
but
speed.
just to get into our heads, because I've found this over the years, trying to get it into people's heads. If you physically move a disc through the air, the rotor disc feels like it's moving through the air, doesn't it? If you hold the rotor disc stationary, let it spin, but blow across it, what does the rotor disc think it's doing? It still thinks it's moving.
because it's relative.
It is, absolutely. And for some people get it straight away, and others that messes with their head. Because if we say, okay, imagine this. It's a 10 knot wind out there coming from the north, and you fly towards the wind at 10 knots. How fast is the rotor disc going through the air? Now, some people get it immediately, and others won't. They'll say, well, 10 knots. Yeah, but the air's coming towards you at 10, and you're going at it at 10. You add the two together, you've got 20 knots.
Half of it will see 20 and the other part will see 0.
Potentially, etc., etc. Okay, what about when we turn around and we move the other move away from the wind at 10 knots? How fast is the rotor disc going? And we all start to, if you're not careful, you'll think, well, it's moving over the Earth's surface at 10 nautical miles an hour. And you go, I know, but the disc doesn't know that. He hasn't got a pair of eyes or an airspeed in a little speedo or something, or GPS. So how fast does this disc think it's going if it's flying with the wind at 10 knots that's blowing at 10 knots? 0. Okay, so let's say some people get it straight away, and others it will just take a bit longer to kind of work that in their head. Like, huh? I don't understand that. But until we understand that, we can't fully understand how a rotor disc is now going to behave, because often the assumption is there's no airflow, there's no wind. You think, yeah, but even if the disc moves, if we make it move, it creates its own airflow, the way it goes. And if we sit stationary and the wind blows, it's the same thing. So yeah, then we start to look at this whole retreating and advancing blade. So what's a retreating a blade and what's an advancing blade?
Side of the disc where it's moving into the wind, the rotor is going faster relative to the air, but on the other side where
Yes.
going straight forward through the wind, that's going slower versus the air. The airspeed over the rotor is slower.
Excellent. So think of, we'll just say the Capri G2 because I started off with that one. Looking from above, remember the rotor's turning clockwise. So if you were to look out the left-hand side of the helicopter in slow motion, that blade appears to be going forwards. Out the right-hand side, it appears to be going backwards towards the back of the helicopter. Now, if we're absolutely stationary and there's no wind, the airflow over those blades is exactly the same. But the second you start to move, or the wind blows, but we'll just say move forwards, the blade on the left-hand side feels like it's going faster through the air because you've got the increase of airflow that you're moving, you're creating. And the blade coming back on the right-hand side loses it. It's not as good. So if we go back to that lift formula, where would we see this change in this lift formula? So a helicopter begins to move forward. Does this alter? Does this lift formula change?
Changes the W.
So it changes the W. Does it
change to stop?
Does it change the coefficient of lift at all? Don't go too. If you know I'm going down the route I'm going down, don't go jump too far ahead. But we've spoken so far. It's just started to move forwards. Well, just for a split second, no. The coefficient of lift of the blade, let's just say for 1 second, doesn't change. The half doesn't change. The head edge doesn't change. The span doesn't change. But the V the velocity squared, yes, you've said already. The RPM doesn't change if we just figure that's a constant, but the VW changes. So the advancing blade gets an increase in VW, which means it gets an increase in lift. So on this Capri G2, that left-hand side of the rotor disc is what we class as the advancing, and it gets an increase in lift. And the poor old other side, the retreating, gets a decrease. Increase on the left, decrease on the right. What happens to your helicopter?
Yeah.
Whoa, and it would be violent as well. The effect is significant. Okay, we've got a problem. So how do we get over this? And this was one of the big problems of the story's good. It's not factually perfect, but you know, Sikorsky, for instance, etc., was apparently leading the race against the French. I can't remember who that was actually. Something like that. So anyway, there's some manufacturers, you know, some early designers trying to overcome this problem. So the story's not perfect, so please don't shoot me with it. But you know, they've all got their helicopters. They can all kind of sort of hover, but the second the wind blows or they move, it goes violently out of control. And there is actual footage of that sort of thing happening.
So as it goes round, do you change the angle of attack as you go round, as it goes round?
Good. So if we've got an uncontrolled increase or decrease here that we just can't do anything about, it's just the pure principles of flight of them moving forwards, we've got to be able to change something else.
Blade flap.
We can't change this, we can't change that, we can't change that. So all we're really left with is something in here hiding there. But how do you change the angle of attack in the coefficient of lift mechanically?
Because you can do it as it goes round, you can change it as it goes round.
You could do, but could you imagine the permutations of what you'd have to allow for? Every single different density of every bit of blade, of every different speed, of every RPM on every design.
Onto that, yeah.
It's like, oh my gosh, I should think it's nigh on impossible, isn't it?
No, I wouldn't pretend to know how to do it, but yeah.
Yeah.
That's,
And you imagine you might even have to have a blade that you can change that pitch angle all the way down the blade constantly as well. I mean, it's an engineer's nightmare. The inventor's like, just make that happen, it'd be fine. So there's something else. This is where the
blade flapping, I think.
Blade flapping, good. So what's that then?
It's when one blade, the one that creates more lift, the one that moves forward, is going down to create less lift than the other one, and then they can make the same lift, even though one creates more lift than the other.
It's good. It's just a little bit that's not quite right. You just need it the other way around. So the advancing blade, the one that's getting a better benefit from the VW, it's loving life. Yeah, you have to allow it to flap up, because if it flaps up, I'm not going to go fully into all this, but you'll get the idea. You can look it up in the book. By flapping up, you actually decrease the coefficient of lift. It reduces the angle of attack because of the relative airflow, and the relative airflow is something we can't control, by the way, in the helicopter. But it just decreases. So you get an increase in VW, but you get a decrease in the coefficient of lift on the advancing side. So whilst it gained one end of the formula, it lost at the other end, and with a bit of luck, it balances out, and your lift remains the same.
So how do you do that?
Well, this is what you know, Sikorsky and the others were desperately scratching their heads trying to, because when you look at the helicopter designs, the early ones, rotor blades were rigid. They were really stiff, and they thought they had to be because they mustn't bend and buckle and move.
Right.
So they were really rigid. And then they've somewhere, I don't know if it's by accident or what, but they realized, oh, hang on, if we actually allow them to kind of either bend just because of the materials used, or maybe put a hinge down here or something like that, if we allow them to flap, the action of flapping whilst it's moving forward, if it flaps up, it reduces its coefficient of lift because it changes the way the airflow strikes it.
So you make the
And if you
blades more flexible.
You kind of allow just literally allow the blades to go up if they want to go up and go down if they want to go down. And the retreating blade is doing the complete opposite. It's flapping down to help improve. So the poor retreating blade that had a bit of a loss here and was going to end up missing out on the lift, actually, because it can flap down, it alters the relative airflow. It gives it a slightly bigger angle of attack, which ultimately is what generates the lift or controls how much lift is being produced, gets its benefit back again, and has a lovely equal lift. And what we end up with is these wonderful words of dissymmetry of lift. Now, there's a very quick explanation. There's a bit more to it than that, but that's the general gist behind it. Why do we need to know that? I mean, it's it's going on up there all the time and very fast, and we don't actually have to do anything. It's all done for us. Who cares? Surely that's the right attitude, isn't it? It doesn't matter.
I imagine it's built into the design of the blades.
Absolutely, it is. Yeah, we have as far as this whole flapping to quality and symmetry of lift and whatnot's concerned, yeah, we don't really have to do a lot. It's all done for us, thankfully. It's all been so. Does it matter? And I'm obviously being a bit flippant about it, like, who cares? It doesn't matter, does it?
We need to understand there's a limit to that, don't we?
There is. There'll be all sorts of limits, but it's something else. You know, when you do something, there's usually a consequence, isn't there? Sometimes they're good consequences, sometimes they're not so good. Sometimes they don't really matter particularly. But this whole flapping to equality to maintain this symmetry of lift, there's bound to be some secondary effects of this. And I wonder what they might be. Blund.
Stability, the whole thing begins to wobble for one of the more
It doesn't, no, because it's all kind of seamless, actually. It works really well. Yeah, and it's so fast, of course, it's not a slow motion thing. So no, it doesn't cause a wobble per se.
Maybe the fact that it happens 90 degrees later, because I remember something about it that
That's I'm not going to go fully into the thing that I'm about to talk. Oh, I nearly said the magic word there. Yeah, there's phase lag, advance angle, and gyro
yes.
rotation, all sorts of things. But let's just skip a little bit of that and just jump forward to what's the kind of the secondary effect of all of this flapping to equality, which is a good thing, by the way, because without it, we don't fly. It would not work. And if you don't fly, I wouldn't expect you to know. But those that fly, so all the people I'm looking at the moment that
The
have either began to learn or have got the license.
the helicopter is gonna want to roll at some point.
So we do look at something called inflow roll. Yeah, absolutely. But what about flatback?
Mm.
And flatback is a result of this whole trying to resolve this dissymmetry of lift and the helicopter moving forward. The blades have got to start flapping up and down. So the rotor disc completely, it literally moves. It moves as a whole in the air. And the net result is the rotor disc, as we try and go forwards through the air, increasing our airspeed, the rotor disc actually starts to, we call it flat back. It flaps, but it ends up literally pitching, if you like, nose up, i.e. backwards. So suddenly it's like, okay.
The limitation because it's to do with the rotor speed. Do you keep the rotor speed?
Rotor speed the same. Yeah, that's a constant. Yeah. So what this means to us, therefore, yes. Yeah. So what this means is, your helicopter that we've just been describing, sitting there stationary, zero wind, as you try and make it go forwards with the cyclic, push the nose down, it starts to move forward, literally, vroom, the nose comes up. It's like, I didn't really want to do that. So if you are not expecting it, it catches you out. And so you thought you're going forward, and next thing you know, I'm now going backwards. And then what it does, it flaps forward. Oh, yeah, I'm now going forwards, and then it goes backwards, and it increases in its amplitude. And in fact, actually, you would start to notice that whenever you vary the airspeed, it occurs, this flat back and the opposite flat forward. So suddenly we do need to know about some of this lift formula stuff, this magic that goes on up there, because it will affect us very much directly in how the helicopter. Yes, that's right. So it has a bit of an undamped Fugard effect. And so in forward flight, one of the very, very early lessons in exercise, mostly exercise 5, but it could be demonstrated in 4, as we try and fly faster, literally, if you just make one movement on the control, push the nose down, it flies faster, and the nose comes right up. And the amount it comes up, A, depends a little bit on the helicopter design, but B, how much airspeed you try to gain. So this whole flat back effect, if you only try and gain 1 knot of airspeed, the effect will be minimal. You'll barely even notice it. If you try and push hard and gain, let's just say 50 knots, oh yeah, the effect will be tremendous. And we have to learn how to overcome it. And that then becomes one of the maneuvers we do. We start to use these mnemonics called select, hold, and adjust, for instance. And then the complete reverse is true as we attempt to slow down. So to quickly reiterate, this whole flapping to equality to resolve dissymmetry of lift, which is a very, very good thing because it would be disaster without it. Is a pain when we fly because we get flat back and flat forward. But because we know it's going to happen, we can preempt it. We can actually just push through it both ways. So if we want to accelerate, we push the nose down. As the nose tries to come up, we push the nose back down and keep it down, and it eventually becomes a thing you don't even have to think about. And if you want to slow down, you sort of first pull the nose up, and then you have to keep the nose up to have a nice constant attitude and a constant deceleration. So by knowing about it, we can deal with it quite happily. And then it'll weird you out because when you fly sideways, left and right, it does the same thing from any direction because the rotor just doesn't have a front or back. Yep, absolutely. Very good. So we'll just stop there actually. Look. Okay. So this very briefly, because it's important you know about all this bit. This flat back and flat forward, I've already just said it has, if it left unchecked, if you started the process in forward flight, so imagine we're flying along, it starts off as a little wave, it gets bigger, 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 and it really amplifies rapidly, exponentially, if we didn't do something about it. That's obviously bad. But I want somebody to give me something good about flat back and flat forward. And ideally, again, you would probably have to fly to know this answer. What's good about flat back and flat forward?
Is it because it limits your speed? It's if it worked the other way, that you down there and then the train just steadily increases.
Very good, yes.
It actually
yes
stops you.
It gives us a bit of speed stability.
A bit of feedback, or feedback to reduce the speed.
Yes, that's right. Imagine for 1 second that if we didn't have flat back and flat forward, if you push the nose down the helicopter, it just keeps accelerating. It never reaches a constant airspeed, for instance. You would be permanently. I mean, people are anyway usually when they fly, but certainly to begin with. But you soon learn actually if you just chill a little bit and just hold a fairly steady attitude, and you can almost see the rotor disc doing its thing, going up and down, flapping backwards, flapping forwards. Your airspeed almost stays the same, doesn't it? We don't actually have to work that hard at it. And that's because of flat back and flat forward. So it gives us a bit of speed stability. Because you're right, if we're just cruising along, we've got this perfect attitude. Everything's in a nice equilibrium. We're just maybe doing, I don't know, 80 knots. And there's a little bit of wind shear that changes the airflow outside. Your helicopter suddenly has changed airspeed. As far as it's concerned, it's going a bit faster or a bit slower. Well, flat back and flat forward will come into play and start to help resolve that. You have to kind of assist it a little bit, just a little bit, but it gives us speed stability. Very good, Graham. Very good.
I have a background in design of ships, and
yes, I remember. Yeah,
propellers.
Yes,
and it's quite. I mean, you don't have a situation of moving forward, otherwise you're basically changing the depth of the ship. So that remains constant. So that thing about the effect of one blade increasing the other one does not exist in the ship. There are other issues which, because half the propeller is shielded by the ship itself. But it's similar but different.
It's called aeronautics for a reason, isn't it? Yep, there's a crossover without a shadow of a doubt. Not just purely in some of the things we've already just discussed, but in the laws, etc., how we navigate, all sorts of things, isn't it? Yes. Yep, very good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, so anybody got any questions on this so far? The lift formula, what we discussed, this whole resolving dissymmetry of lift.
I do have one question. I remember something from the book about the blade flapping, saying it's the only effect that is not how do I say it? Not affected by the input of the pilot, something like that. It's the only one. I remember.
Yeah, it's I say flat back is something the blades flapping to equality, etc., etc. It's something we can't control. It is what it is. It's saying thankfully it all works normally very, very well. And we can use it to our advantage, like say, and give us a bit of speed stability, that sort of thing. But we have to know it happens because to gain new speeds, we have to push through it or pull through it, for instance. But yeah, it's something that we don't directly control. We can kind of have other effects that might impact on it a little bit. But for the most part, it always happens whenever you vary the airspeed, there'll always be flat back and flat forward. Okay. So anything else we could add this whilst we've got it on the screen so I don't have to write it again? Oh, I can save it. Anything else this lift formula might be vague or
I suppose it applies to the tail rotor as well.
very good. Yeah, excellent. Do you know what? Everybody forgets that. Yeah, it's so overlooked. It's untrue. This is why I've got the model with me. I always sort of set the idea once they've got their head around maybe a main rotor. I say, look at a tail rotor, and you get a model. You turn it on its side and turn the tail rotor into a main rotor. You say, look, it's very similar to a main rotor blade. Yeah, can do. Yeah, please. Thanks, Holly. And when we start looking at the mechanics of it, the tail rotor has a collective lever, but we don't call it collective lever. We call them pedals. But if you push the pedals, you change the pitch angle on the blades, just like we would do with a collective lever on the main rotor blades. It's a disc. It's spinning round. The blades might even have a bit of twist in them, some various other things. So it behaves in a very similar way. What a tail rotor doesn't have. Thank you, Holly. So if I did that with a model, look, it is. It's like a main rotor disc. It's a little one. And you don't very often do this, but you get the idea behind it. But what the tail rotor doesn't have is what sort of a control?
No cyclic.
It has no cyclic, does it? So we can't tilt that tail rotor disc around. We can collectively increase and decrease the pitch on the blades to make it work harder or not as hard, but we don't have a cyclic. Whereas the main rotor disc spinning round, we've got a collective lever that collectively increases or decreases the pitch of the blades by the same amount. But the cyclic, whoa, okay, this is another one of these weird dark art thingies that's no idea how it really works. But what it does is it manages to change individually the blade's pitch angle as they rotate around this 360 degree to influence whether a blade flaps upwards or downwards, separately from this whole flapping to equality thing. Yeah, and ultimately what it does, the cyclic just tilts the disc around. I like getting down that route of, so does the cyclic therefore cause a bit of dissymmetry of lift momentarily to make the disc tilt? It's like, whoa, let's not go down there. Okay. So yeah, we've got this control in our right hand, like so most of you probably know about this already, that will make the disc tilt around, forwards, backwards, left and right, as we see it in the helicopter. But remember, there's no front or back really, is there? Collective lever, increase and decrease the collective pitch. Roughly speaking, makes us go up and down, and the cyclic we can go, if we're talking about flying around, faster, slower, turn right, turn left. Then we've got pedals, which collectively increase or decrease the tail rotor pitch to control this movement, the yaw helicopter. Okay, so tail rotor. Yeah, we can, sorry, just bear with me 1 second.
I think Oxford should probably come here with
Stuck on screen share. Oh, okay, yeah. Sorry, my wife's just saying we're stuck on the screen share. Yeah, I wanted to just leave this. You can all still see the lift formula, can't you? On screen. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it on just for a second longer.
I just can't see you moving that helicopter blade around when you're showing it on that.
Oh, what, on a tiny little, can you see?
Yeah, I
Can
can't
you see me at the moment?
Well, I can't. Everyone else can. It doesn't matter, but I can't.
Okay. Can you see me waving, everybody? Yeah. Okay. I might just be. It depends on how you got, whether you're on speaker view or that sort of thing, as to what will show up. Okay. So yeah, the tail rotor. So what does the tail rotor get if a main rotor gets it? Well, it gets flat back, it gets flat forward, it gets dissymmetry of lift, all these sorts of things as well. Does that have a massive effect on the helicopter? No. No, it just does its thing back there and we leave it alone. It sorts itself out. Ultimately, we just change the pitch on it and to control the yaw of the helicopter to get the result what we want from it. But do think about it as a main rotor as well. It's quite useful to think of it that way around. Okay. Right. Anything else we want to do with this lift formula before I get it off the screen? Okay, just very, very briefly then, because I did say, let's just imagine that some of these are constants. Well, what about if we change this? We said this was density, wasn't it?
That's going to change with height.
Yes. Yeah. And you said about that, didn't you, Sophia? Sophia, because we've also got Sophie online. So Sophie P, she's up the top right-hand corner there. Which doesn't help because our friend's daughter's called Sophie P as well. So it's this is getting really tricky. Okay, so with altitude, you change the air density. Well, of course, that's going to, as we already said earlier, but we can now see it written down. It'll have a huge impact on the lift if you go into much thinner air. Doesn't help at all. Okay. Did that. Let's say I haven't. Do you want to, can you share on your screen? We'll close. Does can you still see the lift formula on my whiteboard? Anyway, how do I stop sharing it then? I thought I should I say there we go.
There you go.
Sorry, I do apologize. They have changed the controls around on the Zoom since I last used the whiteboard. I haven't used it for a long time. Right, okay, yes.
It's got a really good question.
Yes.
How does the number of rotor blades actually affect the airflow around each other?
Yeah, okay, so we're going slightly down aircraft general knowledge here and designs of aircraft. Why do some helicopters have 2 blades? Some 3, some 4, some 5. I think there's one with 7, isn't there? If I remember right. I'm sure I've seen one with 7 blades.
The big Russian.
Massive, yeah, that's it. Yeah, I'm sure it's about 7, or it might even be 9 blades. So does that make a difference? Remember, we want to kind of try and stick to principles of flight, don't go too much aircraft general knowledge, but
It makes a difference also with the equation you just showed, because it's the surface area probably. The more blades you have and the bigger they are, more surface area.
Possibly, yeah. Although we tend to talk more about the surface area, more like the span. So from tip to tip, for instance.
Mm.
So it'd be the diameter. But it would probably stand to reason if you had more blades of the same design and you pulled up the same amount of pitch on those blades at the same RPM, you would expect them to generate more lift. So why have more blades? All right. Why does a Robinson
More
have
weight and rigidity.
good? So more blades is generally heavier, isn't it? And that's not such a good thing. So there's got to be a reason why some helicopters have more blades than others.
Maybe you have to spin them slower, then you will have to spin less blades.
Maybe, but that doesn't always work. That's not normally what determines the RPM of a rotor disc.
Different rotor head.
Yes, so we start to get down. Like I said, I don't want to go too much down the aircraft general knowledge stuff, but yeah, designs of rotor head. Why does a Robinson have 2 blades and a Capri have 3?
It's cheaper for manufacturing.
Robinson's got a teetering head, isn't it?
Yes, it has. Yeah, and as Blum said, a teaching rotor head is in most respects far more simple. And there might be some advantages of just 2 blades, like a Robinson or Robinsons or a Jet Ranger. In that, if you want to put it in a hang, you don't need as much space laterally, left and right. They slot in quite nicely next to one another, so there's some advantages.
The more blades, the more lift can be produced, I suppose. Just because the big helicopters, they usually have many blades, and then
Yes, so good. So it would without doubt stand to reason. Like I said, if you only had 2 blades and you're trying to lift a very big, heavy helicopter, those blades are going to need to be big to generate sufficient lift. Whereas the maths doesn't work out perfectly, but if you took those 2 blades and made them half the length but turned them into 4 blades, it doesn't quite work out the same, but you would sort of maybe generate a similar amount of lift. So you could do that, couldn't you? I say it doesn't work perfectly like that, but you get the general idea. And of course, there comes a point whereby a rotor disc can only be so big because
The limiting tip velocity.
because of the tip velocity. So if you slow the blades down to get away from the tip velocity, you're losing RPM and you're going to affect the lift formula. So there's this kind of ultimately, to a degree, size of rotor disc where bigger than that, it just becomes inefficient, or you just have to because the helicopter's so big and you have to have so many blades. So yeah, when you look at those whopping great big, massive great Russian helicopters, there's whopping great big. I dread to think how big the diameter is. It's probably like 60 feet or 80 feet or something obscene with multiple blades. It's just purely because of the weight of the aircraft underneath it. It's got to lift. It just won't manage it with smaller, fewer blades. It has to have that. So when you look at something like the Capri G2 and the R22, they're vaguely similar. The Capri is actually heavy, or it starts off heavier and can be heavier. So why would it have 3 blades and an R22 only have 2 blades? Well, it comes now. Yeah,
Different designs.
yeah, exactly. You know, Gimbal wanted a fully articulated rotor disc.
You could say it's a newer one as well, like more advanced.
Well, fully articulated,
Design.
been around for a very long time more. Yeah. In fact, you probably find, I got a sneaky feeling fully articulated was around before teetering, I think.
Oh, wow.
Only just quickly going in my head back to early helicopter designs. I'm sure they had usually 4 blades, not 2. And teetering came along a little bit later on. So advantages of teetering rotor blades are 2-bladed systems like the jet range from the 22, say parking them in a hangar. Not as expensive.
What's a teetering? It's a term I have.
Yeah, good question. So why call it a teetering? What happens when something teeters?
Are we changing relative to the aircraft? Are we actually changing the axis of rotation of the blades, or are we just cycling the blades through a change in pitch?
Through a change in pitch. Yeah, so we don't physically move the mast around, for instance.
So what's the difference between teetering and an articulated one?
Come on then, somebody else answer that. Oh, Blund's volunteered. Blund, hang on, just bear with me 1 second. The spotlight's on you. Yes, sir. Right, difference between a teetering and a fully articulated rotor system.
Teetering is working blades together, I guess now.
Yeah, seesaw, good. Seesaw effect. So
Yes.
teetering.
They have a 1 delta edge, but fully articulated for each blade is working freely. And
Each blade works independently.
Yes,
blade
that's
works
right.
for themselves.
But it's not a delta 3 hinge. That's
Oh,
that's
sorry.
on a tail rotor. So tail rotor, like on the wall, that has a delta 3 hinge, but that's to try and limit the amount it flaps. Again, we'll see if we get onto that. That's the aircraft design. Yeah. So teaching rotor head.
Thank you.
Teaching rotor head is just simply 2 blades, for instance.
Yeah.
And true teaching rotor head, if you like, it literally just has 1 bolt holding onto the mast that goes to the middle, and it acts like a seesaw. It literally just sort of rocks like this around that bolt, so it's free to seesaw.
Okay.
Or it just gets called teetering, because if something teeters, it's usually a bit wobbly on the edge, isn't it? Kind of thing. So that's what the main rotor disc does on the jet ranger in particular. There's just 1 big giant, well, there's actually a few bolts, thankfully. There's 1 big bolt through the middle at the top there that just holds the hub, which the blades are rigidly attached to, on the aircraft. It just seesaws. So as 1 blade flaps up, the other blade flaps down. And it needs to do that. Again, we'll see if we get into exactly why. Whereas a design where you've got multiple blades, you can't have it seesawing.
Particularly if you have an uneven number of
Exactly,
blades.
yes. But of course, you could say that's all right. You can have it teetering. Look, you could have it seesawing here. It's like, yeah, but what about these two? They can't seesaw at the exact same time, because as it all moves around. So hence each blade moves independently. So what do we say, you people that fly Robinson? What do we call that teetering rotor head? We call it another name.
Semi-rigid.
That'll do. Yeah, semi-rigid. Absolutely. Good. Why is it semi-rigid? What do you mean by semi-rigid?
It doesn't have a flapping hinge.
Ta-da! Yeah, good. So I can see Blund's trying to find the words for it. Yeah. So the blades, what we call, they feather, they flap, but they don't lead and lag. So it's the lead and lag hinge we're after, Stella. Remember, yeah, 2-bladed don't lead and lag. If they did, that would be disaster, because the blades would no longer be in line, and therefore the center of them would be way out of balance. That would not work. Whereas a fully articulated, like who's online more, the Capri P2, and Stuart. Hi, Stuart. The blades, they can flap, they can feather, they can also independently from one another move position. They can lead and lag as they're going round, and they need to.
And if you mentioned it already, can you remind us why does they lead and lag?
Because it's quite simple but quite complicated, and certainly to try and describe. So I'm going to get you can look it up in your own time because otherwise it'll take me about half hour to go through it all. It's called Hooke's joint effect. But what it is you have to now try and imagine, without me drawing it, when we look at this rotor disc on this model, if I was to measure from the center to the tip of that blade, it would probably be exactly the same as the center to the tip of that blade. Would you all agree?
Yes.
Perfect. And at the end of the day, when we're measuring things like the diameter of rotor disc, we go from tip to tip. We don't follow necessarily the length of the blade. So if a blade had flapped up at an angle from the tip is suddenly, if I exaggerate up here, the distance from there to there is much shorter. We don't measure down the blade and then along the next one, we go tip to tip. So this blade has suddenly it appears to be shorter. And when we start looking at things called conservation of angular momentum, just like Winter Olympics is on at the moment. Who's been watching the skating or anything like that? At some point, they usually pirouette, don't they, with their arms out, and they go quite slowly. And as they bring their arms in, they go faster, don't they?
RPM increases.
That's right. Absolutely. Now imagine if they tried to do it with just one arm. What would happen? They would spin faster, but
it would be.
Oh my God, it'd be way out of balance, wouldn't it? They'd probably fall over.
Yeah.
It'd be really tricky and look very ungainly, and I'm sure they'd lose some points. So it'll be very difficult to pull one arm in. Well, if you pull one rotor blade in by making it flap up, it causes a massive imbalance. It's really bad news. So what happens is this blade, because it's got a bit closer, it does spin faster compared to the others, and that kind of puts the center slightly out of position. And by some magic, it balances it all out. Hooke's joint effect. Have a look in the Principles of Flight book. That's a very quick description. Okay, it's a fast description, but that's why it does it. And teaching blades don't need to, because if you imagine them slightly bent up, this way I look like a Wally on the screen. That's it's about the easy way to describe it. If you watch the tips of my fingers, as one blade goes up, it seesaws, the other blade goes down. And what you'll find is the distance, because the where it's attached to the mast is not a straightforward dead line. It's on what we call a gimbal, so the whole thing swings around pendulously underneath it as well. So as this blade flaps downwards and this one goes up, this blade actually gets pulled slightly in because of the gimbal. And as this one goes up, it gets pushed out slightly. So the distance between the tips to the mast is it never changes. So they never feel the need to go faster and slower, which is really good, because that's a bad idea. That would cause a huge imbalance.
Paul, can I ask? I've never flown the Cadbury. I've flown the Robinson and the Jet Ranger. Does it feel different to fly a helicopter like the Cadbury with the fully articulated head?
Well, I mean, first of all, every helicopter feels different anyway, doesn't it? Even you go from one R44 to another one. They've all got their own little personalities, and they all feel slightly different. Some more powerful, smoother, etc., etc. Something to remember, which is interesting, and I do. We were talking about it this morning, weren't we? When we teach people to fly, first of all, we're teaching you. I usually say, "Well, I'm going to teach you to fly every helicopter in the world." I mean, it's not strictly true, but it sounds good, doesn't it? Every helicopter in the world, the technique we're going to teach you, you can employ, and then we're going to specifically teach you in the one you've chosen, the Capri G2, the R22, the Jet Ranger, whatever it is, kind of thing. So what you get at the end of it is a license that could be potentially used to fly any helicopter, sort of, and then a type rating on your specific one that has its characteristics. So the bit like pretty much most cars, they've all got a steering wheel. If you turn the wheel, it generally makes the car go right. Turn it left, goes left. Press the accelerator, it goes fast. Press the brake, it slows down. So some basics are all the same. So the feel of the aircraft is a really difficult one to answer, because they all do feel different. But there are some characteristics of a teaching rotorhead versus a fully articulated one. So it is a really good question. Clive, you're going to have to just come and fly one to find out. We'll book you in a minute. Okay, so anybody that flies multiple types, so Holly does over there.
Both as well.
She has. So come on, I'll do some answering. How does the Cadbury feel different from an R22?
The Cadbury is very responsive, whereas with the 22 and the 44, there's definitely some delay, because you are literally like a pendulum under the rotors. So there is a lag with movements, and I think you particularly feel it in the hover. So I don't know whether you found this, Stella. I don't know whether you tried hovering, but actually, if you're hovering in a Robinson with a teaching rotorhead, it's sort of very just sway. Whereas you can feel yourself on the ground cushion really nicely in the Cadbury because you just feel every movement. I think that's a very quick example.
Yeah. So oh, let's just spin you around on a teetering rotor head. Doesn't have to be Robinson because it could be Jet Ranger, for instance, anything with two blades. The main rotor mast is not rigidly attached to the hub where the blades are all attached to. It seesaws, remember? So the rotor disc, which is in reality really what we fly. We actually just really fly that bit spinning around up there. The rest of it all hangs beneath and follows along, which is quite handy because we're sitting in it. That's really what we fly. We really have to think about that.
I
Okay.
remember that feeling, the big difference when I
Yeah,
tried
it is.
the 206 for the first time. It was very, like
And also that's
Ollie
much heavier as
described.
well. So it'll respond differently. But a teaching rotor head, if you imagine the rotor disc not being rigidly attached, if you've slowed it all down, if the rotor disc starts to tilt one way or the other, the mast doesn't happen instantly. It doesn't immediately make the mast move. So the rotor disc would tilt and then it would pull maybe in that direction, and then the fuselage would swing underneath it. Now that all happens quite quickly. You know, we're not talking 5 or 10 seconds. We're talking within a split second or so. It's pretty much happened. But in the Cadbury, the rotor head, where the blades are attached, is rigidly attached to the mast. So any movement is immediately transmitted through the mast and immediately through the fuselage. So in the Cadbury G2 or a fully articulated rotor head, especially if the helicopter is light as well, so it has less mass involved, you do that with the cyclic, the helicopter will literally do the same thing. It'll wobble around all over the place. In a teaching rotor head, you do this, the aircraft will barely move. So it suddenly feels very, very different.
Does that mean the Cadbury is more difficult to fly than the R22?
Another very good question. If you who's been lucky enough to drive a pretty high performance sports car or something with very positive steering, you know, small movement on the steering wheel, the thing will goes around the corner, go-karts, that sort of thing. Anybody's driven anything like that?
Yes.
Yeah, great fun, aren't they? And then you get into your big, comfortable, whatever, Mercedes, and you know, you turn the wheel and it eventually sort of gently wafts around the corner. It's all quite sedate, isn't it? It's quite comfy. And then you get back into your little go-kart car and the thing's wiggling around what's the difference?
Difference is very,
You need to react quicker.
very fast.
Possibly. Yeah. So in the
very quick response.
yeah, so in the analogy, the go-kart on a go-kart track is perfect, isn't it? Because it needs to be quick response for the tight corners, etc., etc. But it's a bit twitchy. You know, there's no just cruising along gently with your hand. You've got to pay attention. Whereas I just said a big Mercedes, for instance, because it's heavy and smooth and all the rest of it. You stick on a go-kart track, it's not going to be anywhere near good, is it? But it'll feel a lot smoother, maybe, along those lines. Now, that doesn't mean to say that the go-kart can't be smooth. It depends on your style, doesn't it? If you drive it gently, you can probably drive it relatively smooth. And the Mercedes, if you give it a bit of, you can probably make it around the corners a bit quicker. So
small movements.
So yes, what something like a fully articulated, like the Cadbury, what the Cadbury will highlight is if you are unnecessarily moving the cyclic, because it will just do what you've asked it to do. Whereas a Robinson, if you do a bit of wiggling, doesn't do a lot. You get away with it. And you sort of think, okay, I get it. The Robinson will be smoother to hover. And the Cadbury might not be. Okay. So far, so good. Happy with that? Right. What about in windy conditions then? When the wind is now affecting the rotor disc on your teaching helicopter, the rotor disc is tilting because the wind is blowing, it's doing all sorts of things. It doesn't transmit it through the mast at first, and eventually it does and starts swinging your helicopter around. You make an input, but that takes a moment to react. Whereas on the fully articulated rotor head, in the Cadbury, in the windy conditions, the wind blows, the mast, the disc tilts, the mast tilts, and you make an input and you get it back.
We've got to be on the ball with the Cadbury.
Well, both of them you have anyway, but yeah. But what we find is usually the Cadbury, certainly in the early days, just feels a bit more twitchy, but you can kind of keep it in one place a bit easier because it responds to what you're asking it to do if you're doing the right thing. Whereas the teaching rotor head feels smoother, maybe, but you tend to waller around far more. Have you found this yet, Holly? So the teaching rotated students in the early days, they really do sort of swing pendulously around quite a lot sometimes. Whereas the Cadbury ones don't tend to do that, not in that way. It doesn't tend to pendulously swing. It tends to just go way in a direction. No, it doesn't really. So to try and answer your question, it's actually really it's not easy.
Yeah.
You know, is the Cadbury more difficult to control? I'd say no,
Right.
because it responds quicker to what I'm asking it to do.
Yes.
But it is affected quicker by external influence. The teaching rotor head, though, you can make it feel potentially smoother in the hover, less twitchy, but it's a little bit harder to keep it over a given spot, for instance, because it's a little bit less responsive. So this is why we usually say when somebody wants to learn to fly, why don't you go and try both and see what you prefer? You might suddenly find you find one much better than the other. We can never tell actually which way it's going to be. It's not always the way we think it's going to be. Okay. All right, so try and get it back to principles of flight for a second. We were trying to build on the whole, looking at the lift formula, weren't we, to try and fathom out how this rotor disc starts to work, and then we get into the whole. Okay, so we get the idea that the blades are spinning round, and if we pull up on the collective, they're gonna, with a bit of luck, generate some lift. And remember, it's very indirect. We can't literally control how much lift is being generated. We influence it, but if lift is a function of things like RPM, if we weren't controlling the RPM, that would have an effect on lift. If the lift is proportional to what we call the relative airflow, which is how the wind or the airflow strikes a blade, and that will constantly change whether we are hovering, because when we hover, sitting there in the hover, you have to start imagining the air. Where's the air that's coming down through the rotors? Where's it coming from? From above. Good. Hopefully we'd all agree that. Great. So the air comes down from above. And does it go through the rotor disc slowly?
No, just normal.
Pretty damn fast. That's what my answer would be. It's being sucked through there at a fair old rate. You know, you've got to use air, and there's not really a lot of, you try and grab it, there's not a lot there resistance there, is it? These poor blades are trying to constantly claw their way into the sky, trying to lift me and you and a load of fuel in an aircraft. And if you take a little old Cadbury G2 with a load of fuel, it's 700 kilos. Now, that's not an awful lot, but go on and you go and lift it and see how you feel. And those blades are trying to do that. So actually, they're having to work really hard. And of course, and again, this is another one of those things that people sometimes struggle to get their head around. The faster the air is coming down through the rotors towards them, the worse that's not good. That's really bad, because the more the rotor blades have to work to try and get a hold of them, that air, to try to get a bite on it. I sometimes, for anybody that's not really, sorry, I didn't really get that. I use the escalator thing. So right, escalators. You want to go up a flight of stairs at the tube station, one of those ones that's got a whopping great. Oh my God, look at those stairs! I know we're going to make it. Don't worry, it's got an escalator. The only problem is the escalator's coming down, and you want to go up. How hard do you have to work?
Well, you're a lot quicker.
You've got to work harder than if you just went up the stairs, haven't you? So the faster the escalator comes down towards you, the harder you've got to work just to make any progress. If somebody would stop the escalator, you'd actually do just as well as walking up the stairs. And if somebody actually made it go the other way, well, happy days. And that'd be true. If we managed to get an airflow coming up through the rotor as opposed to the one coming down, they work even better. But that doesn't very often happen in normal, just sort of sit there in the hover. So therefore, the longer we sit in the hover and the more chance the rotors have had to draw the air down from above, the greater it accelerates towards the disc, the more collective we need and power from the engine just to keep the thing off the ground. And so indeed, a helicopter in the hover is really inefficient as far as the other stages of flight.
If we start moving forward, we can reduce the power.
Yeah, absolutely. So by moving forward, and again, we start to, in classroom and in your books, you'll look at thrust vectors and also thrust vectors and or vector diagrams and all sorts of things in there. But we could go back to the lift formula. And what happens is when we start moving forward, whilst we got advancing blade, retreating blade, flapping to equality, all those sorts of things. Sorry. Oh, can you all hear me okay? Okay.
Yeah.
So it's my wife, Catherine. She said, "Can't hear you properly." I thought you fed up with my voice. As we move forward, flapping to equality, all those sorts of things. In the lift formula, within the coefficient lift, that starts to improve, and therefore we get a greater lift. So as we move forward into clean air, and you know, one of the ways to describe it is try and imagine it. Yeah, the air over here has no idea that we're a helicopter flying until we get to it, and then it's kind of and it goes down through the rotors, but it hasn't had much of a chance to accelerate. Whereas remember, it's stationary in the hover, it's coming from quite high up, accelerating fast, not good, like the escalator coming quickly. But over here, the escalator's barely moving. And when it gets to us, and it works better. And we discover this, don't we? And this is our translational lift. So as we translate, as we move into nicely clean air, the lift very indirectly increases. Okay, so principles of flight. How could we use this translational lift? And then we're going to mention this thing called effective translational lift, ETL.
Between 12 to 15 knots.
So between, around about 12 to sort of 15 knots, something happens, and this is the effective translation. If there's suddenly a really noticeable change in the airflow through the rotor.
When we overcome the vortices that were
right.
created.
Everything gets a lot cleaner. It passes through the rotor disc at a much slower speed. The inflow angle's less, etc., etc. And the rotors, for the same collective pitch, suddenly work a lot better. And if we happen to be closest to the ground, moving along at about 12 to 15 knots, there's quite often a little bit of a shudder and a shake, and it tries to go up because it's suddenly working better. It's not like the engine suddenly got more performance. It's just the rotors got more performance, and it goes up. So how could we use effective translational lift or translational lift to our advantage?
How can be used?
Yeah, because that's what principles of flight is all about, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's understanding all these things and then going, right, so therefore we can.
So you don't go straight up, you go up and move horizontally to improve the lift. Is that?
Yeah, we could do. And this is why in the movies we get people sometimes come for trial lessons, and maybe they've never been in a helicopter before, etc., and they assume that we're just going to go straight up off the helipad, vroom, up in the air and off we go. It's like, well, we can usually, but we don't. We tend to like to move forward first because it makes the rotor blades work better, so the engine doesn't have to work quite as hard. And therefore when we reached a certain speed,
going enough speed.
Yep.
With translational lift.
Yep. So would it be true, therefore, those of you that sort of study this sort of stuff, the faster we go, the translational lift increases and just gets better, 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 better? There is, there's a U shape, and we start to look at this thing called the power required curve. Do you remember to quickly put it on the screen? I think I opened it up already. Oh, that's lucky. Where is screens? There it is. With a bit of luck, can you see where it says power on your screen? You should be able to. Yeah, good. There we go. Look at that. There's this thing called the power required curve, and all these things down here are if you like, different forms of drag or that require power to overcome. And hang on a minute. Time. Pouchages of flow, and this one here, this power to induce a flow, this is kind of like the one we're talking about. So if we go down this end of the graph, this is, if you like, lower airspeed and higher airspeed, or true airspeed, and this is power required, typically coming from the engine we're talking about in a moment, to make that helicopter fly at very low airspeed. Takes a lot of power. But as we move forward, the power required starts to drop off. But there suddenly comes a point when we look at the black actual power required curve that it goes back up the other side. Why is that? Yes.
Because of the drag.
Yeah, and in particular, look at things like this parasite power. This is drag. Why does it go in a curve? Why not a straight line?
Because of the quadratic relationship with
Yeah, you lost me there. It just does, doesn't it? No, yeah, that's right, absolutely. So yeah, very good. That's right. It's exponential, isn't it, basically?
Yeah,
So
distance squared or speed squared.
yes, that's right.
Yeah. Yeah.
So a little increase in speed, the drag goes up a little bit. You increase the speed a little bit more, it goes up a bit more than it did before. You increase the speed a bit more, and you keep going through that process, and suddenly you get down this end of the graph, you increase the speed a little bit, and the drag, hey, goes off the scale.
Yeah.
It often explains things like in car, everybody drives cars, so you normally know why cars, you take a little, nowadays a 1 litre engine will do probably 100 mph. But to get that car to do 200 mile an hour, it's not a 2 litre engine. It's more like an 8 or 9 litre supercharged, blah, 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 streamlined car to get double the speed. It takes a vast amount more power to just up that speed, especially once you sort of hit the 130, 140 mile an hours in cars. To get them faster than that takes them an awful lot more power to push through that point.
It's the same, just to digress, the same with ships. If
Yeah,
you design
absolutely.
ships for 30 knots and you've got 4 main engines, 2 driving each of 2 propellers, you get full speed is 30 knots. You'll get 24 knots out of just 2 engines.
Yeah, that's right.
Because the last bit requires twice the power to go from 24 to 30 knots.
So when we put all these form and skim power, this is like rotor profile power, just to turn the rotors through the air. And until you get into very high speeds, compressibility airs and whatnot, the drag that you have to overcome is fairly constant. I said this is the one that we've been talking about, translational. This is the sort of sucking the air down through the rotors. The faster we go, the less power it takes to overcome all of that lot. And you start adding all these together, and we get that lovely power required curve. Sometimes this is drawn correct. Just I'll point this out for a second. Why is there a bit of a dip this end, by the way? Shouldn't always be drawn like this, to be honest. It's missing something or a bit of information.
Ground effect?
Whoever said that was you, Clive, isn't it? Yeah, ground effect. So when we hover near the ground in light wind conditions, some of the some of the airflow that's coming down through the rotors going under the helicopter, it gets trapped under the helicopter like a bubble. If you struggle to get your head around principles of flight, you can think of it as a cushion, because we often call it the ground cushion. And a bit like sitting on a cushion, it sort of lifts you up a little bit. It's quite soft, actually. It's sort of slightly elevated, up a bit higher. In helicopter terms, it means it slows the induced flow down a little bit, and you get a little bit more lift for the same pitch angle on the collective lever. So that's the ground cushion. So in this, we'd have to sort of, have to write something by the way that this is close to the ground. So it's clearly sitting on a ground cushion. Otherwise, it would just go up there as well and straight up. So it's quite often we tend to draw them now with 2 little lines. I usually draw a little green one here to show it's close to the ground. And then otherwise, the black line goes higher up, just to make sure we understand. Because this is not necessarily being close to the ground. This is up in the air as well, away from the ground. It's all the same stuff. The physics don't change particularly. It's great. Okay, so we get onto our power required graph, and the more you understand this, the more you start to understand exactly why the helicopter does what it does. So for principles of flight question, for all you lovely people, on this, I know there's no numbers on it, but on this graph, and please don't read too far ahead on anything. In fact, I'll try and cover it. That's all right. Whereabouts on that graph does the helicopter use the most power to fly? And not climb or descend, just level for a minute. So whereabouts on that graph does it use the greatest amount of power to sustain flight?
In the hover, is it? I mean, in the hover.
Well, one would argue the hover, especially the way this is drawn just there, that is lower than that.
Yeah.
Just above the ground.
So just above that point, and down the other end.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
at higher airspeeds.
Yeah.
So therefore, somewhere in the middle, oh, hang on, the power required is significantly less. And depending on the helicopter, it can be not quite, but nearly half the amount of power required to travel at that halfway point. The Cadbury is actually, I think they've done this on purpose in the Cadbury. It's metric, which makes life a lot easier. It's decimalized. It makes our life a lot easier, doesn't it? But also, this number here is typically 100 knots. This number being 0, guess what halfway is? 50 knots. And it's true, the 50 knots is what we call the VY of the helicopter. It uses the least amount, in the Cadbury, sorry, it uses the least amount of power to sustain level flight. We sit right down there, and yeah, you see it literally. The collectively, because the meter, thankfully, is also a digitalized, and it's also in metric numbers, percentages. Literally, at 50 knots, sometimes if you're light enough, the power's almost down to 50%. Whereas in the hover, if you okay, not if you're light, but the power in the hover could be high, be up near the 100. And if you're flying at 100 knots, the chance of the power is as high as we're allowed to use it. But in the middle, it uses the least amount of power. So
that's your economical cruising speed.
So here's another good one for you. So with that in mind, so 50 knots in the Cadbury uses the least amount of power. Will that make it fly the furthest?
No, it says on the graph it's not. That's best range is different.
Aha, yes, right. There's some this. Oh, sorry, I thought it was down here. Best endurance. What's best endurance, more?
I forgot the word endurance. I think endurance is like wow, I forgot the word, what it means in English.
If you
go for a given amount of fuel.
If you endure something on endurance runner, what do? You put up with it for the longest, usually, don't you? If you endure something like a dodgy film. Oh.
Oh, endure is like to survive?
Yeah, kind of thing. Yeah, if you like. Yeah, absolutely. That'll do. So it survives the longest. It will last the longest, but it doesn't necessarily go the furthest. Because we've got to remember that one of the things we're overcoming in a helicopter, apart from drags, is gravity. We've got to keep these things off the ground. And of course, a certain amount of power is used just to keep yourself off the ground. It's used to turn the rotors, etc.
Is it getting lighter? You're using fuel.
Well, there is that, but that'll have an effect on it.
Right.
But what we discover is if you just go slightly beyond there, what you'll realize is when we turn speed into distance because of time, we can see it literally here that to a gain of that amount, so look how long that line is, has only required a very small amount more power to achieve a greater speed. So for instance, to achieve let's just say a 10% increase in speed only required maybe a 2% increase in power, i.e. fuel burn as well, only 2% increase. And if we kept thinking about that, we know it's going to start, unfortunately, to go the other way. But if we manage to work out, okay, so what about a 15% increase? Oh yeah, it's okay. That only required a 10% increase in fuel. Okay, we're still winning. We've got an extra 5% on speed/distance, haven't we? And eventually you realize, okay, we get to the point whereby a 20% increase in speed. What did it do to the fuel? Yeah, that was a 20% increase. All right, we're literally at that point now where it's not going to really work, is it? Because although we're going faster, we're burning the fuel faster. So we just have to come back a little bit from that point as well. So if you try and keep going faster, 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 it all looks great because you're going faster, but unfortunately, fuel you're burning is going up rapidly and you are not going to make the distance.
If you introduce a headwind,
Pardon?
what happens if you introduce a headwind?
Well, it just slows everything down, doesn't it? So we realised that best endurance, we can make the fuel last the longest in the Cadbury G2 at 50, but to get the greatest distance, the fuel won't last as long time-wise, but you'll get greater distance if you go a bit faster. And it's about somewhere around about 85 knots. Somewhere around about there. Cadbury will actually, they sort of advertise economical cruises 90, but it's not strictly speaking quite the right speed. When we delve into the true physics of it, Guess what so take an R22, teaching rotor head, completely different shape fuselage, completely different tail, etc., etc. I wonder what speed this point here is in an R22. You'd have to fly one to know. Stella, can you remember? Ross?
53.
Literally about 52, 53 knots. I mean, that's pretty damn close to the Capri, isn't it?
Why? Yeah.
And there's a tiny bit of me thinks, I wonder if Gimbal just literally thought, wow, we'll just round that down to 50. It's an easier number to remember, isn't it? Might as well, hey? And then I wonder, R22, if you try and fly for the range speed, I wonder what that happens to be.
83.
Yeah. Well, that's pretty damn close to the 80 to 90 that I said, about 80, 85 knots. How can those two different helicopters with two different rotor designs, and the engines, the core of the engine is the same, but they've got different ignition systems, they're different weights. How the heck can that all be the same? I know, we'll try another one. Let's go big. Let's go Jet Ranger. Teaching rotor head, turbine engine, big old helicopter. I wonder what this speed is here. Go on, have a guess. It's got a slightly sleeker nose, but bigger disc.
I'll say
50 knots.
It's about 50 knots.
Is it?
Guess what? Yeah, you're never going to get this. There's no prize. Guess what its range speed is, its true range speed. About 85 knots. Yeah, so and then there'll be slight variation, but when you think about the physics behind it, it's all the same stuff.
Yeah.
So this graph that you're looking at applies literally to all single engine helicopters pretty much, and the numbers will be very, very close to one another. And this is why we say this is now non-specific to the helicopter, as in type of helicopter. It's only when you get into twin engines things change a little bit because you've got another engine running which takes fuel just to make it run. So the numbers are potentially slightly higher because you're just burning fuel to run a second engine. Doesn't quite work exactly the same. But yeah, it's all the same stuff. Yeah. So we now learn the basics of helicopters, and then we apply the specific numbers to the aircraft you're flying, which won't vary a vast amount. It's all very similar. They all use more power in the hover. They all use more power at their top end speeds, and they all use less power somewhere in the middle. And those numbers are very similar. Yeah, pretty cool, huh?
Yeah. All right.
Okay, so we don't have it on here, but if we were to draw on here maybe the limit of the engine, and we'll just say something like again the Cabrio or the R22, it would typically be maybe around here somewhere. The line would be up there, and that's your power available. And from that, we could see as it crosses over this line here, remember, this is the one that's required to maintain level flight. It then gives us our theoretical top speed in level flight, as long as there's nothing else that would affect it, structure of the aircraft, retreating blade stalls, and all these sorts of wonderful things. Tips going supersonic. To fly any faster, you'd have to go into a nosedive. Now, some helicopters, if you take the R22, if it's light enough, that little helicopter, yeah, it will reach its VNE without running out of power. If you take the Capri, the VNE on it's 130 knots, but it will not do that in level flight, even if you're very light with everything you're allowed to use power-wise, but it will do it in a bit of a nosedive. So it's allowed to fly a bit faster, whereas the 22 is not meant to go above 102 knots down at these sorts of levels. But that's more just to do with design of rotors and various things and stress. Okay. So when we draw our line on there of power available, we can then see, this is the distance between available to what's required is the margin. And again, we can see there's that biggest margin of power at these middle speeds around about the sort of 50 knots. And when we get back down to that slower speed, the power margin is minuscule sometimes, especially when we simulate that we're operating at higher altitudes, the air's thinner. So if we just take this generic graph for a minute, if we were to make the helicopter heavier, what does this graph look like? Does it change? Does the power required just to turn the rotor blades through the air change because it's just heavier?
No.
No. Does the parasitic power, and parasitic power, by the way, or drag, is, we're not talking about to turn the rotors, because you just said that one. It's really to make the thing move through the air. So anything that causes drag, the skids, the fuselage,
Doesn't change either.
that doesn't change with weight. Definitely not. So those two stay the same. So what about this one here? The power required to suck enough air down through the rotors to get this thing off the ground and stay off the ground. If you are heavier,
That would change.
most definitely would change. And the resultant is the black line would be drawn a bit higher up. It shifts.
Yeah.
You could cheat and say, if this was 100% on your helicopter, we would just pull it down a bit. But in truth, it's the black line because of the induced power required grows, it goes up. So the total power required also shifts up. But really important to remember, yeah, the parasitic power and the induced power, the rotor profile or form and skin power doesn't change. And of course it does. It makes perfect sense when you think about it. Yeah, if the thing's heavy, it's going to take more effort to keep it off the ground, isn't it? Absolutely. So we see it as, yeah, we're using more power, there's less spare. Okay, so we were talking about this translational lift thing, and we realize that the translational lift is described here. The more we move into clean air, the less power is required to achieve the same result. We just touched upon the fact that there's a little dip down this end because of the ground cushion. And therefore, really, this line also ought to kind of dip as well, because it's that one that dips, that creates that little dip. And it's written on here, look, 12 and 15 knots, suddenly the power required, vroom, drops off dramatically. And there's just this distinct change of airflow through the rotor disc. That's all you need to know as much as that, just for the moment. How do we use that to our advantage? Because that's where I was getting at in the earlier stages before we digressed. So somebody that flies already a helicopter, how do we use that, especially that bit there, that effective translation lift? How do we use that? We most definitely do, or we should do.
The lever down a little bit.
We could put the lever down a little bit, yeah, and use less power. Or what about if we don't push the lever down?
Go a bit faster.
Yeah. If you don't want the helicopter to suddenly climb with its what it perceives as suddenly this extra power, we could just put the nose down and tilt the total rotor thrust forward, which reduces the vertical vector and keeps it maybe the same as it was before, and accelerate quicker. And it's true. If you watch carefully, it's quite often what we do. If you watch really carefully, you see us sitting in the hover, and especially if you're heavy and we're a bit restricted on power, remember, imagine our power available line. If it was right up there somewhere, we haven't got loads more to pull. If we put the nose down excessively, it'll fly straight into the ground. So we have to gently. We put the nose down gently. We just begin to accelerate, and it all looks quite gentle. And then you can almost see it happening. The helicopter, you'll watch us put the nose down more, or it might just climb a little bit and we put the nose down. That's effective translational lift taking place, and we accelerate quicker. Because if we maintain that very slow rate of acceleration, bearing in mind we don't particularly want to climb away until we've got to somewhere maybe 40, 50 knots, that's going to take a much greater space. And if the space wasn't available, we'd need to be far more efficient with it and get a shift on.
You can actually see it. If you look at where your downwash comes down, as soon as you start to escape the vortices, you see the downwash start to disappear. It's fine.
Yep, it says water on the screen. You can see it go up the screen. So when we're in forward flight, like Holly's just sort of said, when we're flying at even above 30 knots, for instance, the downwash is being pulled down through the rotors. Bearing in mind, there's a lot of it to keep this thing off the ground. I wonder how far down over the helicopter it goes. Would you like to have a guess? Anybody? So do you hear what I just said? In forward flight, above, let's just say 30 knots. In the hover, the downwash goes over the fuselage and under the helicopter, most definitely. But if we go above 15, 20, 30 knots, how far down does the airflow go, I wonder?
Not very far, I would
No, not at all. Yeah, probably about a foot down under the disc, maybe. It's about all. Potentially, maybe a smidgen more than that, but not a lot more. Yeah. So much so that in forward flight, it doesn't even touch our horizontal stabilizer sticking out the back of the helicopter that, bearing in mind, is tilted upwards a little bit in forward flight. It doesn't even manage to touch that. Yeah. So only just about goes down the and out the back. Like I said, it's fascinating watching the raindrops. You're sitting there in the hover. First of all, we've got laminar flow over the windscreen. So the airflow over the windscreen is actually very slow. But the raindrops generally get sort of pushed downwards just gently. As we hover and hover taxi and just go a bit faster into this translational lift, like Holly said, the ruffling grass sort of disappears out of sight. It's left behind you. That's the ground cushion and the downwash. And the water droplets actually go backwards. They go up the windscreen. As the airflow starts to hit the windscreen and goes in the opposite direction, you can actually watch it happen in waves. It's amazing to watch. Well, I think it is pretty cool. Most people probably like, what a sad day, but it's cool because you can see it happening. Guess what? If you can see it happening,
This is why it has the telltale on the screen.
that's just to show the airflow over the windscreen. So whether it's nice and middle of the windscreen, once we get a little bit of speed up, not all helicopters have it. But yeah, if you can see this effective translation of taking place, it means you can be ready to use it rather than it happening. Whoa, whoa, what's that? And whoa, and wobble off into the distance. So when we get into an exercise like exercise 13, transitions, where we transition a helicopter from a hovering machine into a forward flying machine, there's a lot that happens, an awful lot. To name a few, we sit on the ground cushion. You need to know about that because as you move forward, you fall off the ground cushion. If there was a ground cushion at all. If you're too high, there's no ground cushion. If it's too windy, there's no ground cushion. If the ground's not suitable, there's no ground cushion. Or you get a partial ground cushion. Okay, you generally fall off the ground cushion and it sinks. Well, you better stop that by pulling up on the lever. Don't worry, that causes a bit of yaw, so you need a bit of pedal at the same time, depending on which helicopter you're in. As you begin to accelerate, you get this thing called flatback, which is going to try and pull the nose up. Ah, we've talked about that. So you get ready for it and you push through it. Then you get this thing called translational lift, which actually is happening all the time, but is very pronounced around 12, 15 knots. The helicopter vibrates, depending on which helicopter, how much it vibrates, and it tries to lurch into the air if you're not careful. So we'll either lower the lever to stop it from doing quite so much, or we'll accelerate, or a little combination. We also get this thing called inflow roll, where the helicopter tries to roll left or right, depending on the design of the helicopter. And that's also about how the airflow is not perfect when it goes to the rotor disc. All of that lot happens. And if you don't understand all that, it's a nightmare, isn't it? You watch people trying to do transitions that have no understanding of all this lot, they struggle because they can't preempt it's about to happen. They can't see it and feel it.
See what's going to happen.
Yes.
It catches everything.
Catches you out.
Everything is new.
Yep.
You can't predict what's happening.
So when we're flying, we attempt to stay at least about 3 steps ahead of the aircraft so that it can't catch us out. So we have to permanently think ahead. But in reality, we do that when we drive and we don't think about it. We just don't realize we're doing it. But in the early stages, there's a lot going on and it takes a lot. So a lot of understanding of this stuff we're talking about gives us a bit of a head start and gives us slightly ahead of the aircraft until we get used to it. There we go. So
train driving is a lot easier.
yeah, well,
just stop and
yes,
go.
say that. Yeah, that's right.
You don't even understand it.
Look, I'm sorry we didn't get through all of the principles of flight because there's a lot. But rather than skipping over them all, I wanted to just make sure we've got a good understanding of just some of the basics. Remember where we started off from? I just actually pulled you right in and said, well, we'll just start off with the air. Because at the end of the day, this is what we're flying in. And then we realize, oh my God, it has a huge influence over the aircraft. So the more we understand about that, the better understanding we're going to have about how these things fly. And we built it up from there, didn't we? Trying to give you a bit of a basic understanding. We looked at the lift formula. You don't have to know the ins and outs of it, or actually have to apply numbers to it. You just need to understand the relationship of the lift formula. And it starts to make sense, how it works, what happens. Some of it's very indirect, some of it we can influence and or maybe even control. And then we can start to apply that to the aircraft. And for the most part, the main rotor disc, but don't forget the tail rotors, behaves very similar to a main rotor. Everybody forgets about that. And because at the end of the day, what for the most part in most helicopters, what we really fly is the main rotors. So if you can understand that lot, that's the bit that's what this is connected to. That's what that's connected to. And that's what the throttle, if it's in your left hand, is connected to. It's all up there. That is what we fly. It doesn't have a front or back. But generally we figure that's forward and that's backwards and that's left and right. But if you turned in your seat, that can be forwards if you like. Yeah, so it is without a doubt the better understanding principles of flight, the easier you will find getting on with flying rather than it just being a trial and error muscle memory thing. You'll have a better understanding and be ahead of the aircraft. And it will pay dividends without a doubt in the early days and in the later days as well, when things are piling up on you because you have to do everything. The more ahead of the aircraft, the easier it'll be.
And that's why I should buy helicopters and not aeroplanes.
Oh yeah.
Yes. There's much more to it.
There's a lot more to it. Yeah, if you're a bit of a control freak, they're brilliant because you have to fly them 100% of the time.
Yeah.
But also, if you like to be able to land places like a nice restaurant or that has a suitable landing site, yeah, helicopter's the thing. It's tricky to get a plane into those places.
Do you see a development then of flying cars when what you described there is all done by computers and AI and so forth? So you want to go up, you go up. And go
Yeah,
forward, you go
probably
forward,
without a
and you
doubt, of
don't-
course.
You don't get up. You don't have to do all the corrections. That's
Yeah.
all done for you.
Yeah, I mean, if you just take a helicopter with an autopilot at the moment, then it pretty much does all that anyway for you. It is all controlled. But the one thing that still to date you have is a pilot that can fly without all the assistance.
Yep.
Yes, because the second that assistance doesn't work properly or is not used correctly,
Yes.
it's not great, is it? So, but yeah, the one thing we do know is it's not a million miles away. In some countries, you've already got drones that will, caps in the sky, but they are either remotely piloted or there's very few places that will actually allow them to truly be completely autonomous. So I think we're a little way off from that yet.
Yeah.
I figured that when we've all got driverless cars, the aviation will probably maybe follow 20, 30 years behind it, perhaps, I guess, something like that, maybe.
They're coming.
It'll take a long time, but yeah.
September in London.
Yep,
Wayne.
that's right. Yep, Milton Keynes had driverless buses. Yeah, if I remember rightly. I think that's one of the first places that trialled it in the UK. I've not been on one, but I just know about it. And we all think, wow, that's scary. But how many of you have been on the train at Stansted Airport or the Docklands Light Railway? There's no driver. It's driverless. All right, it doesn't fly, but and it's on rails, but still driverless. And we've been used to that for a long time. Don't think too much of it. So there we go. Anybody got any questions?
Thank you very much once again. Excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome. No problem. I hope that's useful.
Thank you, Paul.
Look forward to seeing you. Yeah, you're welcome. No worries. That's all right. No problem. Sometimes just going over the basics does help people because it gets lost otherwise or forgotten.
Can I ask one last question, Paul?
Yes, of course you can, Moya.
About the lead lag again. I remember that it's called lead lag dampers. There's the thing that it's like the in the rotor of the cabin that's called lead lag dampers.
Yeah.
Now I'm trying to understand why. Like I know the dampers are supposed to absorb some of the forces. So how is it related to the lead lag? I never understood this.
The dampers are a bit like a shock absorber that's attached to the rotor blade to the hub, just to not necessarily to minimize the amount they lead and lag, because they have to lead and lag by a certain amount, otherwise you'll get excessive vibration. But they'll just dampen down the effect and rather than allow vibration to set in, for instance. If the blade was very, very free to move, it might be a bit jittery, if you like, whereas that shock absorber just slows down, like suspension on a car. It needs to move to absorb the road. But if you didn't have a shock absorber, your wheel would bounce and vibrate. It's horrendous and horrific. So shock absorber just helps smoothen the action down. And that's kind of like a lead lag damper. But, the structure of them also means that without them, the blades would be pretty unstable when you're just sitting on the ground without the rotors turning, because they would sort of possibly just sway forward or backwards, and we don't really want that happening. So the dampers just dampen down the movement and just soften, if you like, and make it.
You'll be surprised by how hard it is to find answers for a simple question like this in Google. Like
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you never know if they're if they're accurate or not.
Well,
especially with
yeah,
AI
this
and
is,
everything.
as we all know, this is often the problem with using a search engine, especially with AI now. I mean, it's amazing what it can do, but it can make a wrong answer very convincing, very
Yes.
convincing. So it's better to those sorts of things. It's definitely better to get it out of a book that we have, isn't it? But you're right. There's not many books that will tell you exactly what that lead lamp damper is, why it's there exactly. But it is
Yeah.
just like the name suggests. It's just to dampen it down. It's just to
Thank
soften
you.
it.
Hitting a resonant frequency, when
Yes.
you get a disturbance, it'll takes the
Yes,
vibration
that's right.
out. It doesn't let
Yeah,
it
lasting one's
carry on.
vibration is not good. Not good at all in engineering, is it? It's very bad. Just before it goes, just a quick reminder, 10th of March, Met. So all about the weather. Well, I'll say all about it as much as I can remember. Yeah, no, so Met, 10th of March. It's a good one. Because the weather, a bit like principles of flight, really important you know about it because it seriously affects what we do. As we all know at the moment, because the weather's not been great. But the better you can predict it and understand what you can do with the weather, perhaps it might allow certain things. Yeah, without doubt.
That's a good question. That's why I asked for the model. So in this area,
I'll just say goodbye. See you later, everybody.
Thanks very much.
Right.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Paul.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Very entertaining.
Bye-bye.
Next time on
Hey, you're welcome, no
escalator, I'll
worries.
think of translational lift.